Well, you all probably have heard the news. The U.S. has dropped bombs on Iran. So I want to share a few of my thoughts on the matter. So I don't understand how much longer, as a country, as a people, we will continue to allow ourselves to be involved in endless, open ended conflicts around the world. I don't understand how much longer the U.S. can remain the sole policeman or the sole just belligerent force around the world, getting involved in toppling regimes, changing governments, and, just causing mayhem and destruction around the world. But this is less of an analysis of American foreign policy as it is just the psychology of the people in the country, wanting to understand why it is exactly, people will find themselves agreeing, listening to whatever is being spewed out on the TV or on the radio as propaganda, the psychology of people who allow themselves to be suckered in and buy in hook, line, and sinker to basically give the government a free pass to do whatever the hell it wants. I don't understand those people. I grew up during the Iraq War days, the invasion, and it smelled fishy at the time, the whole claim about weapons of mass destruction, the rush of everything to go to war without having the inspectors do their jobs, listening to dubious people give, testimonies about Saddam Hussein's weapons programs and conflicting narratives about why we were going in there. Originally it was sold as, this is the war on terror. We need to respond to the 9/11 attacks. And then suddenly it became about, well, we need to spread freedom and democracy in the Middle East. And somehow that was connected to terrorism because they don't have freedom and democracy. That's why terrorism is allowed to foster. And never mind the decades prior of U.S. involvement, toppling regimes, and being involved or funding resistance movements against, at the time, the Soviet occupation in Afghanistan, and all these things. Putting all that aside, we were allowed to get suckered in. And, it's not the first time, the U.S. has had a long history of this, going all the way back to the 1890s with the Spanish-American War. The dubious claims that the USS Maine was blown up, off I believe it was, I forget exactly where. It was either near the Philippines. I think it was near Cuba, actually. And that is what led the U.S. to declare war on Spain. And, it went well. And I think that's what Americans kind of just take away. It's just like, well, it went well, and we got a bunch of stuff out of it. And it's like, okay. And that's not a justification. I'm sorry. It's just, that's not a justification. And you see this all throughout, leading all the way to now. I can make an argument about World War I. We were actually arming the allies at the time, giving, we were sending on civilian ships weapons and guns and ammunition and other supplies to Britain, to the front. And the Germans picked up on that and said, look, stop doing that. We know you're you're trading with our enemies here, and you're supposedly a neutral country, so stop arming our enemies. And the U.S. says, oh, no, we're not. We're just, these are innocent people. And then, well, apparently it's not. And, they sank the Lusitania, and on board there were weapons and ammunition on the ship. And, that was one of the incidents that kind of dragged the United States into the conflict. And then, the only conflict that we've been in legitimately actually would be World War II. And even then people were like, oh, actually, this or that. But, I think overall, I think just narrative-wise, I think World War II has the least amount of anomalies that make it a much more rational, plausibly rationable decision to go to war. but I mean, just everything outside of that, it's always been this constant, steady drumbeat of more wars, more conflicts, more belligerency, and there's an American population that eats that stuff up. And I don't understand the psychology of the makeup, for a country that prides itself so much on freedom and peace, and we want prosperity and we want goodwill. And I'm just like, where's the actual evidence of that? Where's the track record of that? And I'm sorry, you don't just get to pick the 12 years in the 1930s and 40s of the one time America largely was and acting as a rational actor, as evidence of America's general attitude toward the peace of spreading goodwill and peace. I don't think there's evidence of that. And so anyway, I'm sitting down trying to drill down what makes up the mentality of the person who just eats up all of this propaganda. And they blew it up real good. We it's just like I just I don't get it. And then the counterbalance to that is there's no country in the West that can that acts as a check on the United States. I mean, I have friends from Europe who will tell me all the time about how much they're disappointed and they're upset with American leadership. And I look and I'm sitting here saying, okay, but like, you guys also refuse to do anything substantial to check America. It's only just talk, and you're only capable of talk. And I think that's what is my general frustration. Something has to change, right? Something needs to be different. I kind of half jokingly will say this, but I'm like, I mean, this really has to totally discredit democracy, in my opinion. I mean, the fact that people en masse can vote for one thing and get another consistently. But then I look at the population and I'm just like, well, maybe people are getting what they voted for. I mean, there doesn't seem to be much of an interest in challenging or pushing back on the narratives that lead us into these conflicts. And everyone seems to be okay with the status quo. And then the last part of it is just like, it's not happening to me and my family, right? Like, me and my family, we're not dodging bombs. We're not, we're not under siege. We're not starving. We're not having conflict on our streets. We're not seeing our buildings being destroyed. We're living, in my opinion, fairly frivolous lives, watching, mindless TV, stuffing our, face with foods that are, terrible for us. And we're watching all of this unravel on our TV screens as it's like some kind of spectacle, as it's like a blockbuster. It's this summer's blockbuster film, and I think there's a sickness to all of that. I mean, it just is. There's a perpetual sickness that I can't quite get a grip around. And sure, I mean, there's always, bad actors. There's people all over the world that hate America or who want to do harm to this one or that one. And I mean, there's a never ending line of just terrible regimes and terrible things. But the real question, I just think, is, are we actually on the side of peace? I mean, I have not known, I've been alive in this country for 33 years, and I have not known really a single moment when there was peace, when there was no actual conflict going on that we were either actively stoking or participating in. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what that's like to not be in a country where we are not actually in a state of warfare. And then these guys come home, and there's not really a lot for them to do. There's not really an apparatus that cares about these guys. I mean, if they're smart, they'll land on their feet, I guess, and figure out ways to make civilian life work for them. But I'm just like, man, there's got to be something more than just, hey, I lost an eye in some random far-flung part of the globe fighting for God knows what, and then I come back and I got to work at a car car wash, or I got to do just some banal nonsense, after all that. I just don't see how any of that's sustainable. It just really isn't. And I think our vets deserve a lot better. I think the guys that we have serving in uniform deserve a lot better. I think, I still toy around with the idea of maybe I should, enlist or do something. But, at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to just be sent off to go fight for some bullshit. And then at the end of the day, it's just lining some rich asshole's pockets. I mean, that really was the only thing that comes out of that. And, I'm either actually physically scarred or emotionally scarred. And that's just how it goes. I'm calling people out. I'm questioning this stuff. I'm just wondering where's everyone else? Am I really alone in this viewpoint? Is there literally just nobody else in the country who has some power, who has some amount of fortitude to stand against and stand opposed to this? There seems to be this trick that happens. You run on one message and then you get elected, and then it turns into a completely different agenda. And you'll say, well, but this time is different. There's these circumstances. I'm like, okay, sure. Sometimes that's actually the case. Sometimes that actually is true. But a lot of times, and most of the times, it frankly hasn't been true. It's just been part of the quote-unquote deep state agenda to embroil us in these never-ending conflicts, to basically uphold the status quo, which doesn't actually work for any of the normal people. If you actually look around you, it does not work for you. This doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for anybody who's quote-unquote normal. This line of thinking, this trajectory, this constant just drumbeat of warfare and involvement does not work. It has not produced anything useful. You know them by their fruits. Well, it's produced bad fruit day in, day out, and yet it persists, and no one speaks up. No one speaks out. It's just everyone resigns themselves. Well, that's the way it is. So anyway, would love to know your thoughts. Let me know. All right.